Felicitous greetings, fellow fanatics. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Adam Fanatic, and continuing our 5th anniversary celebration, today we're taking a look at StarCraft Brood War, an expansion pack for the original StarCraft. As an expansion, Brood War assumes that you're already familiar with the base game, and the campaign mode contains many spoilers for such. Without any further ado, let's dive in. As an expansion, the basic gameplay of Brood War is obviously much the same as the original StarCraft. The biggest change comes in the fact that each race can now train 2 additional units. 2.5 for Protoss, but we'll get to that in a moment. The Terrans can now train medics early game, which will automatically heal any friendly nearby biological units that are injured, which makes them great with Marines and Firebats to top off their health after they use their combat stims. Additionally, they can launch a flare at an enemy unit, blinding that unit permanently. A blinded unit has its sight range reduced to near zero, though it can still fight normally if something else is able to spot for it. Medics can also gain the Restoration ability, which will remove most negative effects from a target, such as blind or lockdown. Just keep in mind that it still can't remove a stasis field. Meanwhile, starports can now construct the Valkyrie missile frigate. The undisputed queen of the skies, Valkyries launch salvos of missiles that hit multiple air units at once and can absolutely decimate in air-to-air battles. But like all the new aerial units in Brood War, it's incapable of firing against ground targets. Onto the Zerg, both of their new units mutate from others. The Lurker evolves from the Hydralisk, which can burrow underground even if you haven't researched the tech for such. Although helpless when on the surface, once burrowed, Lurkers can launch razor-sharp spines that travel like a wave through enemy forces, making them great for helping to defend. Devourers evolve from Mutalisk, and are in a sense the opposite of their guardian cousins. Devourers launch acid spores that deal heavy damage to aerial targets and leave those spores on both their target and any enemies nearby that target when it's attacked. These spores cause their victims to take more damage from all future attacks. The Protoss get 2 brand new units, but they also now have access to the Dark Templar as a standard unit. These appeared in the base game as minor heroes, but could not be trained. They're powerful gas cannons in melee that are permanently cloaked, relying on stealth rather than armor to survive. And like High Templar, 2 Dark Templar can fuse with one another to form a Dark Archon. Dark Archons don't have a standard attack, but can use 3 powerful abilities. Feedback allows it to target any unit that has an energy reserve. It immediately takes damage equal to its energy, and that energy is then drained. Maelstrom allows them to freeze a group of biological units for a short period of time, which, for obvious reasons, can be devastating against the Zerg. Finally, Mind Control does just what it sounds like, taking complete control of a single enemy unit. Although in addition to being one of the costliest abilities in the game, it also drains the Dark Archon of their shields. And just like ordinary Archons, Dark Archons have very little HP once those shields are down. And the final newcomer to the game is the Corsair. Like the other flying units, it's a dedicated air superiority combatant, but it also has the ability to create disruption webs. This ability could be seen as the converse of Dark Swarm, as any ranged unit or structure within the confines of a disruption web is unable to fire for the duration of the ability. Onto the campaign, Brood War introduces a full-length story with 27 new missions, with some of the later ones being very challenging. Although numerically fewer than the 30 missions in the base game, they're typically longer and more difficult, so you can actually expect the game to take longer to beat than the base game, certainly a rarity with expansions. While no drastic changes have been made to the campaign formula, Brood War does experiment within its limitations. One map simply has you trying to gather a stockpile of minerals, another has it to where you're fighting against multiple Cerebrits that each have special abilities, and some have multiple victory conditions you can choose to pursue. You also have 2 missions where your actions will slightly change your starting position in the next one. Presentation-wise, the only noticeable change is in the cutscenes. They're fewer in number, but much higher in quality. The models aren't particularly better, but they're always worked into the story this time. You may recall that in my top 5 opening cutscenes video, Brood War's opening was the one I chose to lead off the list with the 5th place slot. It really does a good job of introducing the antagonist of the game. After discovering that the human colonies in the Corpulu sector made contact with not 1, but 2 sentient alien races, United Powers League, who had been continuing to spy on them even after their ships went way off course, went into a panic. With their concept of the divinity of mankind, they deemed this too big a threat to ignore, and reformed into the United Earth Directorate, building a massive fleet with the sole purpose of subjugating the whole of the Corpulu sector. And now we come to the part of the review where we'll be discussing the plot. If you wish to avoid spoilers, please jump ahead to the time coordinates indicated on screen. Initiate temporal distortion now. Still with me? Then don't say I didn't warn you. As before, the campaign is divided into 3 episodes, but the Protoss lead things off this time with The Stand, where you'll take on the role of another executor, later identified as Selendis. Why are the Protoss the only ones that actually get their characters named in these? Regardless, after leading the Protoss to victory, Artanis takes on the role of Praetor, effectively the leader of the remnants of the Call-Out. The first mission takes place mere moments after the death of the Overmind. With Iron Ruins and feral Zerg still running rampant, they decide to flee their homeworld. Zeratul suggests that they take refuge on the Dark Templar's new homeworld of Shakuros. Aldaris briefly objects, but he has no better alternative, and thus the Kali take shelter with those they once persecuted, the Dark Templar, or as they call themselves, the Nerazim. Unfortunately, some of the Zerg have followed the Protoss survivors to Shakuros, and are even now starting to build new hive clusters on the world. After weathering the initial onslaught, the Protoss are contacted by Kerrigan, who claims that now that the Overmind no longer has control over her actions, she's regained her senses. What's more, she reveals that several of the remaining Cerebrits on Char have begun to merge to form a new Overmind. In order to fight against said Overmind, she offers the Protoss an alliance. The Nerazim matriarch Rashagal reasons that they can activate an ancient Xel'Naga temple in order to wipe out the Zerg, but in order to do so, they need 2 crystals from other worlds where the Xel'Naga once walked. Kerrigan agrees to aid them with this plan, and to retrieve these crystals, they travel to Braxis and Char. They have to battle the Terran Dominion on the former and the newborn Overmind on the latter. And as they escape from Braxis, they have a brush up with the UED as they arrive in the sector. But as Artanis and Zeratul return to Shakuros, they find that tensions between their tribes have once again sparked. Aldaris is now leading a rebellion against the Nerazim, citing them working alongside Kerrigan as the reason for alarm. And he might not be entirely wrong. As the Praetor and Prelate try to talk the Judicator down, Kerrigan murders him in cold blood. She flees Shakuras, but the Protoss still have to worry about the Zerg on their own world before concerning themselves with Kerrigan any further. The inter-tribe strife quelled for now, and the Khalas and the Ugraj in hand, the Protoss are able to activate the Xel'Naga temple, which creates a shockwave that eradicates the Zerg from their world. But while the immediate threat has been quelled, another is just beginning to rise. In the Iron Fist, Brood War's Terran campaign, you'll take on the role of a UED captain serving under Admiral Gerard Dugal and Vice Admiral Alexei Stukov. Their first strike takes them to the planet Braxis, Dominion world where the Uraj crystal formerly was. While there, they meet a Confederate loyalist and former member of Alpha Squadron named Samir Duran, who has since become an insurgent against the New Order. Willing to fight against anyone that will put Manx in the grave, he offers his support to the UED, as well as giving them some intel about weaknesses in the Dominion defenses. From there, the UED launches a massive assault of the shipyards above Dylar 4, the primary location for the building and repair of capital ships in the Terran Dominion. After destroying the shipyards and capturing a number of battlecruisers that were stationed there, the UED fleet moves on to the ruins of Tarsonis. While there, they discover a counterpart to the Psi Emitter, a structure known as a Psi Disruptor. Vice Admiral Stukov suggests capturing it for their own use, but Duran suggests dismantling it, as their ultimate goal is to subjugate and control the Zerg, and such a weapon might be turned against them. In the end, Admiral Dugal orders Stukov and his men to destroy the installation. After that comes the UED's first major target, the Dominion throne world of Korhal. Before assaulting the capital Augustgrad, they assault an outlying stronghold. This mission allows you the choice of destroying the nuclear silos, disabling Manx's ability to use nukes in the next mission, or physics labs, ensuring that you won't have to fight against any battlecruisers. Either way, their push to secure the city and the planet is mostly successful. However, just as they're preparing to apprehend Manx himself, he's rescued by none other than Raynor's Raiders, still working alongside their Protoss allies. This leads the UED to Ire, where Raynor and Manx have fled, along with a small base of Protoss survivors that have still remained on-world. They attempt to capture Manx once more, but just as they think they have him cornered, a huge Zerg swarm begins to head their way, with Duran letting them slip by to strike at the UED forces. Stukov takes a contingent back to Braxis, where Dugal discovers that the Vice Admiral has painstakingly reconstructed the Psi Disruptor against his orders. Duran leverages this information to convince Dugal that Stukov has betrayed him. Despite his personal misgivings, Dugal orders that Duran enter the facility and terminate Stukov. Duran does just that, but as the Vice Admiral is bleeding out, Duran slips into the shadows and disappears. With his dying breath, Stukov explains that he recreated the Psi Disruptor in hopes to use it to secure their victory, and that Duran is invested by the Zerg. This proves to be true only moments later, as Duran sets the facility to self-destruct, but the UED forces are able to fight their way through the Zerg forces to stop the meltdown. With Manx now out of reach, Admiral Dugal directs the UED forces to their primary goal, subjugating and enslaving the Zerg swarms. They launch a massive battle battle on Char, fighting their way through 3 broods and their specialized defenses in order to reach the newborn Overmind. Upon reaching the creature, they use a combination of drugs and psionic specialists to manipulate it, thus rendering all the Zerg on Char under their control. Duran and Kerrigan arrive to threaten the Admiral, proclaiming that his victory will be short-lived, which brings us to the final chapter of the expansion. Queen of Blades is the 6th and final episode of the original StarCraft, where you once again take on the role of a Cerebrate, this time serving Kerrigan. She first secures her control over the Zerg on Tarsonis, making it into a temporary base as she strikes a deal with Raynor and Manx to have a temporary truce in order to focus on the more immediate threat of the UED. They reluctantly agree, and she explains that to start her plans, she needs Manx to provide one of his psi emitters, which allows her to temporarily disrupt the effects of the UED's psi disruptor long enough to launch an attack on it. Once it's destroyed, they make a quick detour to gather supplies for their assault on Korhal and then attack the UED stronghold there, allowing Manx to begin re-establishing his capital. However, as you probably already expected, Kerrigan attacks her former allies, striking at both Manx and Raynor's forces, killing both General Duke and Phoenix in the process.
He died because you betrayed him. How many more noble souls do you need to consume before you're satisfied? How many more people need to die before you realize what you've become?
It is done, Sarah. They've all been destroyed. Let us return to Tarsonis to rest. For the first time since my transfiguration, I'm wearied of the slaughter.
With all of her major enemies reeling after her recent string of attacks, Kerrigan returns to Shakuras, staging an attack to abduct the Nerazine matriarch Rajagal. With the matriarch as her captive, she convinces Zeratul to lend his aid to destroy the UED Overmind, which can only truly be killed by the Dark Templar's void energies. Against his better judgment, Zeratul agrees. The Dark Templar work alongside Kerrigan's brood to destroy the UED broods. Kerrigan releases Rajagal, only to reveal that she's being mind-controlled and has been since before the Kali arrived on Shakuras. This is definitely the weakest part of the game's story and is never properly explained, even in supplemental materials. Regardless, Zeratul seals away his former mentor, hoping to find some way to break Kerrigan's control. Unfortunately, the Zerg forces pursue the Prelate's fleet, and with them cornered, he kills Rashagal rather than surrender her again. Kerrigan decides to let Zeratul go, telling him that she considers the fact that he'll have to live with the guilt of killing his own matriarch a greater revenge than any she could have devised herself. And naturally, Zeratul promises that she'll regret allowing him to live. If you finish that mission in 25 minutes or less, you'll unlock a secret mission where you play as Zeratul himself, finding a hidden Terran outpost where they seem to be experimenting on both Zerg and Protoss. He does what he can to end the heinous experiments, but eventually finds a horrific creature that is a hybrid of both races. At that point, Duran gloats, speaking of serving a far greater power than Kerrigan, and that his experiments have already begun on many different worlds, far too many for Zeratul to hunt down all of them before they're ready to be unleashed upon the universe. Back in orbit above Char, Kerrigan has one last problem to deal with. No less than 3 fleets have surrounded her, with Manx having gathered the last of the UED fleet and Artanis and his forces to assault Kerrigan. She manages to fend all of them off, but not without sustaining significant damage herself. As the UED flagship drifts through space, Admiral Dougal writes a sorrowful letter back to his wife on Earth, telling her the truth of what has happened.
Alexei did not die gloriously in battle. I killed him. My pride killed him. And now my pride has consumed me as well. You will...
Broken and defeated, he commits suicide, ending the UED threat to the Korpulu sector once and for all. Kerrigan hunts down the survivors of the Earthborn fleet, and then the Korpulu sector knows a relative peace for a little while, as though various warring factions all pull back for a time to lick their wounds and rebuild their forces. Welcome back, Chronauts. You're just in time to join us for the conclusion. All in all, Brood War is everything an expansion should be. It expands upon the ideas of the base game, refines the concepts therein, and improves upon them. With an expanded unit roster, improved storytelling, and the campaign having more variety between missions, it solidly improves on the base game in just about every aspect. It was a major hit when it released, and it still holds up as one of the staples of the genre to this day. Just be warned that those last few missions really push the difficulty up. If you found the base game to be too easy, you will not be disappointed here. If you're still craving more StarCraft, there were 3 official mini-campaigns released as well, which can be freely downloaded. The precursor takes levels from the demo and adds a couple more in. Unlike the other mini-campaigns, these are fully voice-acted like the full campaigns. Included on disc with the original base game was the Enslavers campaign, which takes place shortly after the fall of the Overmind and gave players the chance to play some higher difficulty missions as the Terrans. They don't affect the overall story much, but the sequel campaign, Enslavers Dark Vengeance, was released for Brood War and introduces the Tal'Darim, an evil tribe of Protoss that go on to serve as major antagonists in the novels and eventually StarCraft 2. And of course, that doesn't even begin to touch on the countless number of fan-made maps. In conclusion, StarCraft lives on as a classic of the genre, and Brood War is cemented as one of the greatest expansion packs ever made. Combined, I find them to be worthy of an admirable 9.7 out of 10. If you're a fan of the series, be sure to check back next week as we'll be wrapping up this anniversary series by taking a look at the massive board game based off of StarCraft and the Brood War expansion. StarCraft and the Brood War expansion are currently available for free to play via Battle.net, along with the option to pay a fee to upgrade to the remastered version. If you're interested in playing, purchasing, or learning more, links are included in the description. But what about you? What do you think of StarCraft? What RTS games do you enjoy? If you have any questions, remarks, or posting points of view, leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you really enjoy my work, please consider funding my channel on Patreon. Until next time, farewell, fellow Fanatics. Thank you again for watching. I have plenty more to share with you if you're interested. You can click up here above my head to subscribe to my channel. You can click over here on my monitor to see the most recent video that I've worked on. Or if you prefer, you can click up here to open this mysterious vault and see what video that the YouTube algorithm has picked just for you.